What's up, guys? Iron sharpens iron. Today, we are going to talk about how to pitch effectively with 99 Oral Hershiser. This is actually my favorite starting pitcher. He doesn't have the best per nines, but he has so much movement on his pitches. He has a sinker, cutter, change, fastball, and a curveball. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my pitching view is set to pitcher offset. Now, the reason I do this is because I want to see right down the barrel of how this pitch is going to break. So you can see here, I've got the sinker, and I can see how this is going to break. If I move to the cutter, which are the two pitches that I use the most with Hershiser, I can see how this is going to break inside to a lefty. And then I can also see the break of the changeup. This basically just drops off the table, as well as the curveball. All four of these pitches are excellent pitches. Now, when I am pitching with Hershiser, I am almost always going to try to bury this cutter in against lefties, and I'm going to try to bury the sinker in against righties. They are so effective, and they look like they're perfect pitches to hit. I mean, this is only coming in at 89 miles an hour. That one didn't cut very much, but it looks like such a good pitch to hit until at the last moment it just dives in and it either breaks the bat or you just completely whiff on it. Now, when I'm pitching to a righty like Trout, I'm doing the opposite with the sinker. I'm trying to ride that sinker in on the hands. I'm going to let this drop because I just want to pitch a few more times to Trout so that I can show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to keep trying to ride this sinker in. It looks like it's going to be a strike right on the inside. That one missed. But then at the last minute, it goes inside, and it's so hard to lay off. You see that? I mean, he just couldn't get enough wood on it. It just jammed him. Now, what you'll notice on all the pitches that I've pitched with Hershiser so far, I have not tried to actually get a called strike on any of them. They all have so much movement that there's a lot of times there's no need to. Like if he takes this pitch, it's gonna go inside. That one I missed my spot a little bit, but normally it's going to go inside by 5 or 6 inches. But he thinks it's a good pitch and he wants to swing at it. So I love to use the sinker in on the righties, and I'll use that cutter in on the lefties. But Hershiser has another pitch that's extremely effective, and that's the changeup. And I really want to play this changeup off of the hand that I'm facing. So if I'm facing a righty, I want to put this changeup in on this side because out of the hands, it looks just like that sinker. So when I put it in just on the inside, it looks like it's going to be that sinker, and he turns on it as quick as he can, but he pulls it foul. Okay, so we have talked about trying to throw these pitches inside. Off the plate, we're trying to get them to chase. But eventually, you might get a guy who's saying, you know what, you've thrown me these pitches enough. I'm not gonna chase them anymore. And that's when you go backdoor with this sinker. It's such an effective pitch. I'm gonna start it right here. It's gonna look like a pitch right off the plate, but it's gonna come right back in for a called third strike. The guy's frozen because he's been taking pitches that you've been throwing for balls all day long, and now all of a sudden that sinker comes in on the outside corner, and he can't do anything about it. Okay, so we've talked about how effective that cutter is on a lefty, but one thing I want to show is that when Hershiser gets into the stretch, that cutter does not break as much as it does when he's in the windup. You can see I just chose the cutter. See how flat this is? There's a little bit of movement here. It's just not as effective. So I want to caution you about using the cutter when Hershiser is in the stretch against lefties. It's not as effective of a pitch. But your opponent doesn't know that, or they might now that they're watching this, but hopefully they don't know that. So instead, when I have a runner on base, I'm going to really rely on this changeup, because he's looking for that cutter inside. I know the cutter is not a good pitch, and I'm going to throw that changeup instead. I'm hoping to get it out of the zone far enough to where he's just going to chop over it. Now, one more thing to talk about is If you have an opponent, a lefty, same with the righty. If he starts taking that cutter inside, start pounding it inside with the sinker. Now, I missed it there. Pretty soon, your opponent is going to say, I'm just not going to swing at that cutter inside. Well, if that's the case, then start throwing him that sinker inside. Because it looks like it's going to be the cutter, but instead, it's the sinker that comes right back over the plate. They roll over the top of it, and it's an easy out. Now, the last thing I will say about Hershiser is don't use the four-seam fastball. At least don't use it very much. Now, you can see here, I just chose that four-seam fastball. It has a little bit of horizontal movement, but not much. And it only tops out at about 92, even high in the zone. It's just not worth it to throw this pitch, not when you have the sinker that breaks so much this way and the cutter that breaks so much more inside. And you can see the difference about what I was talking about when he's in the stretch versus when he's out of the windup. Now, the only time I will use that fastball, the four-seam fastball, is to set up a pitch. Sometimes I will purposely go outside just enough with that four-seam fastball just to make him think that pitch being a ball. But what it does, it sets up that sinker on the outside because now he's laid off it. Now, that was a pretty good pitch. Now he is conditioned to lay off of that outside pitch, and I can throw that sinker in on the outside. So when you're pitching with Hershiser, as a general rule of thumb, try to throw balls that are not actually strikes, but look like they're going to be strikes. And that is how you can pitch effectively with Hershiser.